Before we take the testimony of this panel, I have to recognize, obviously, Josh Fox for his work on Gasland. I don't think, and I think it's realistic to say, I don't think we'd be at this stage of having these discussions without your help in that film. So we all appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Senator, and thank you for your leadership on this issue, and certainly also Senator Kruger. I really appreciate it.
Why don't you start us off?
Sure. Well, I am in the process of making Gasland 2, and since June of 2011, when it became apparent that the Cuomo administration would not continue the statewide moratorium, we began requesting both Governor Cuomo and Commissioner Martens for an on-camera interview to talk about the situation in New York State, because it is crucial to the situation in the rest of the world. Every 2 or 3 months we've submitted formal requests for interviews, and every 2 or 3 months we've heard nothing but silence. In March, we did submit 23 written questions and made it clear that if we didn't get an answer to these questions, we were going to take those answers as on the record. So I'm submitting, I won't be able to get to them all, but as my testimony, the questions that I believe are unanswered. And I want to state for the record that this is not a condemnation of the Cuomo administration. This is not a judgment of the Cuomo administration. I actually believe that sanity will prevail and they will do the right thing. And it is my hope that these questions are what I believe have not been addressed by the SGUI's process. I've been watching the SGUI's process unfold for many years, and it's my belief that the SGUI should be withdrawn. It is simply an out-of-date document, knowing what we know now. But the questions, and I won't be able to get to all of them, start with, number one, we've heard that the DEC is going to speed up its review of 60,000 comments received on the SGUIs and come out with final regulations this spring. Is that true? Since the first round of 1,400 public comments took over a year to process, in what ways has the process changed to allow for the fast-track process to be done in an adequate and careful way? We don't know the answer to that question. Number two, and this is probably the most significant question, addressing the issue of well casing failure. As I've gone across the country and across the world on 4 continents, I've seen the same story unfold over and over and over again. This industry, wherever it goes, it contaminates groundwater. You have people who can light their water on fire, you have chemicals in water, you have a health crisis, you have air, all these things that we've heard about. But there is an answer, at least one answer. There's many ways in which hydraulic fracturing and gas drilling can contaminate groundwater. But the one that springs out as the most obvious is this well casing failure problem. When you have an industry that in their own documents admit that 6% of well casings fail immediately upon drilling, 6%, and that 50% fail over a 30-year period, you have the industry admitting to their own Achilles heel. This is not something that they can hide, and it is also something that they cannot fix. A gas well has 2 functions. One, the actual well, to extract gas. The other is to protect groundwater. It's part of the functionality of the well. There is a 1-inch layer of cement that is supposed to protect groundwater from migration of chemicals and gas. Cement cannot possibly last for the period of time that the gas well has to do that crucial function. That period of time begins with an F. It's forever. If you're putting a conduit into the ground between layers that produce oil and gas and hold toxic chemicals, that mechanical integrity in the cement has to last forever. And we're seeing 50% failure over a 30-year time period. 40% of the wells in the Gulf of Mexico are leaking. 6% immediate casing failure. This is not rocket science, right? It's drilling science. But it is not that complicated to look at the industry documents and say, well, how can you possibly imperil our groundwater situation when you know that these wells have an integrity, a fundamental integrity issue that cannot be solved, that the industry has been trying to solve for decades and cannot do it. In this case, you have a gas industry with an integrity problem. And if a government is going to endorse that plan, you have a government with an integrity problem. So how does the Cuomo administration answer the fundamental flaw of groundwater contaminations we've seen being proved over and over and over again? So those were the first 2 questions. And I will submit the rest of them for the record, as well as another copy of the film, Gasland, and in hopes that this administration will take this very scientific inquiry and journalistic inquiry seriously, and either attempt to answer this and deal with a very flawed, a fatally flawed industry, and withdraw the fatally flawed S guys. That is my hope.